is up, everybody? Welcome to the Burndown YouTube channel. This is a very special edition. I got my buddy Mike here with me from Champion Cooling Systems. We've been trying to get this done for a while, but we're bringing it to you today. So we're here to talk about cooling and then some cooling myths and then questions that you guys submitted here on the YouTube channel. So first and foremost, I'm gonna let Mike tell you who he is, tell you what he does, and talk about Champion Cooling Systems a little bit. So take it away, Mike.
There you go. What is up? See, I got it from you. I stole it from him. I always jack his stuff. So my name is Michael Harding, and I've been in the automotive industry for coming up on about 40 years. So I've done from editorial to journalism, technical editing, writing, marketing manager for Champion Cooling now, and I've toyed around with cars since the 70s. So most of what I know about cooling systems is from experience, not necessarily from going out and getting a degree or an education through a schooling system, but school of hard knocks. So that's basically where my experience comes from.
That's really similar to what I do as well. So yeah, you're not going to get complete scientific data with, you know, all the stats to back things up, but he's speaking from years of experience, and obviously that's what the man does every single day. So his words carry a lot more weight than mine, but you guys will watch me struggle and I can keep a house cool with his help. So hopefully this video answers some questions and helps you keep your hot rods and projects cool at home.
Right.
So
we'll do our best.
So I'm going to just jump in, and like I said, these questions were submitted a little while back, and if you wrote in, I appreciate it. I want to thank you. So it might take me a second to find my stuff. That's the kind of content we bring you guys here. So let me go to my channel, and then we will find the questions. So first and foremost, just off the top of my head, because I remember some of these, let's get into coolant, since we have coolant sitting behind us. Right. I had this question too when I went to Champion, and he answered all this, and this is kind of where this came about, was because I pigeonholed him at Champion, and I was like, what about this? What about this? What about that? And he had all these answers, and I was like, people need to know this stuff, because if I have the questions, and then you guys aren't going to listen to me, so you can listen to Mike. So all the different color coolants that you go and you see pink and blue and purple and aqua,
right.
What do you use and why do we use it?
Well, one of the things that we actually had a customer that was running the Ford Power Stroke coolant because it worked great in his Power Stroke, but the problem is that's for a completely sealed system, and of course our system is vented to the atmosphere, which means it's gonna spit out. If you don't have a reservoir, it ends up on the ground.
So like a conventional, so like my hot rod is a vented system.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So what happens is when you're introducing the atmosphere, you're introducing air to the system. Those types of coolants, like the Toyota pink coolant, the Dex Cools, the fancy coolants like Ford, I think it's orange and all that.
The pink and orange.
Those are for sealed systems, and they don't work very well in our system because we are introducing air to the system. So you find out that it kind of crystallizes, it leaks a little bit. So we've done some extensive testing. I've done this myself for about 3 years. We have a shop, our mutual friend Brandon at Overdriven Performance. He's been using peak coolant, and we use the 10X formula. And this 10X formula, if you talk to Peak, you can get it in the 50/50 or the full strength. And this will work with any vehicle. So I've checked with them, any vehicle, it says it on their website, but it works great in our systems. So this is the coolant that we recommend, is the Peak 10X. So red cap, yellow cap. It's kind of a greenish, yellowish type color. It's not the conventional green that you hear, but this is a newer formula, and it works very well. So we're real happy with it.
So what about like the additives? So being from the racing community, obviously I run straight water, but then they have the water wetter, and then they have the other fancy coolants and stuff. So what's the deal with those, and who needs that and who benefits, and then why would you run it versus why wouldn't you?
Well, that's a great question, because the water wetters, that type of product, was designed for a guy who's running straight water. And what it does is it raises your boiling point so you have less pressures. But they're not selling enough of it, so they started marketing for street use. Now, I have tested 4 different brands, maybe saw a degree or two, and that could be the time of day, it could be how warm the engine is. You really don't need them for the street. If you're overheating on your street vehicle, you need to find out what the problem is. There's no Band-Aid that's gonna fix that other than a better radiator, better coolant flow, better airflow.
And then I would imagine too, if you use like the Evans coolant, it's special. You're not going to get it at the auto parts store. So if you need it in a pinch, what do you do there? Can you add water to that, or I don't really know much about it?
No, the Evans coolant is a good coolant. It's great for someone like Jay Leno, who's got hundreds of vehicles that are stored. It's a lifetime type coolant. If you don't have any leaks, you can leave it in. It's not going to corrode your system. Evans is it's similar to what Water Wetter does, but it's a waterless coolant, not liquidless. It's waterless, and Evans will raise your boiling point, and that creates fewer pressures. But it's not a guarantee that running Evans you're going to run cooler. We did an article with them on our blog, and one thing they told me is they said some vehicles might run 5 degrees warmer, but you need to evacuate your entire cooling and heating system of any glycol-based coolant, and there needs to be less than 3% of any glycol water in your system, and you need to run full Evans, which is about $60 to $70 a gallon. So you could be buying 3 or 4 of them. Now here's the problem: if you do develop a leak, you can put water in to get you home, but guess what? Now you got to flush it all out again, and you've got to start all over again. You can mix with a glycol-based coolant, but by the time you do that, you've already eliminated the purpose of having Evans, because now your boiling point is going to be lower.
Okay, so you could Band-Aid it to get home. So
you could, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So here's a question that we got here. The first one, it says, where was it? I run a Champion radiator, 67 Nova, and I decided to run the factory design top flow. Would side flow work better? I've asked so many people and never gotten a straight answer. So the top flow argument versus the side flow, like a cross flow. What's the difference in that, and does one work better than the other?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've asked people as well, and a downflow or a cross flow, they both work. Your object is from top hose to bottom hose. You want to drop about 40 degrees, 50 degrees. That can happen for a cross flow or a down flow. The advantage of a cross flow is then you can get into the double pass or even a triple pass. You can't really do that with a down flow, but the reason why people don't get answers to that is because it's personal opinion.
So on a like a double or a triple pass, it's going to leave that coolant in there longer.
Right.
So is that a net benefit?
Well, a double pass and a triple pass, it basically you have half the radiator for the coolant to go through and then half again. So you've got more surface area there because it is passing through the radiator twice. So there is going to be advantage of a double pass. So the double pass radiators were basically for the Corvettes initially because very low airflow there. So it allowed them to get the coolant passed through a couple times. Helps cool it a lot better when you don't have a big grill and air has to come from underneath the car. So that helped out, and they realized that's a pretty good idea, but that's been around for a long time.
So you think it'd be a net benefit for somebody that's having a cooling problem, or?
It depends, because we have a single pass radiator, one of our 3-row radiators. A guy rode in, he was real happy, 1200 rear wheel horsepower with a turbo LS. Mm-hmm. And he runs 185 driving around town. So you can get a proper cooling system without having to resort to that. Again, I kind of go back to, if you're having overheating issues, find out where and find out why, and try to solve that before you just throw another radiator at it, because then you're just throwing money at it as a Band-Aid.
I think in his case it'd be horsepower, because I know it's a big horsepower deal.
Right.
So that leads us into the next question about thermostats, because if we're going to go with the dual pass, single pass stuff, I've heard people say that removing a thermostat can cause the car to overheat because the coolant isn't in the radiator long enough to cool. So do you need that restriction? Is that complete BS? What does it mean? And so on. So yeah, it doesn't spend much time in the block and heads either, but still boils. That was the question. So the question, I guess, is do you need a thermostat?
Now, that's a tricky question, and thermostats don't control your temperature unless you have too high of a thermostat. Then you're going to force it to run hotter. Thermostats are really, what they do is they keep, they limit the amount of time it takes for your engine to warm up and get up to operating temperature. So do you need one? You don't, but you need to put some type of restriction. Drag racers, as you know, they take out the thermostat and they have washer kits you put in there,
I've seen
smaller
those.
hole, so it restricts the flow so that you're not flowing through the radiator so fast it doesn't have time to cool.
Okay, so technically you need some, so that you need the restriction to keep
Right.
the water.
Right.
Okay.
And the thermostat, when it opens up, it restricts quite a bit because it is a small passage.
Right. It's also gonna be your minimum operating temperature, like you said.
Right.
So here's a question. It's worded different, but he was asking about fans and like fan flow, and it says, why do people use weak fans when the OEM junkyard fan stuff are better, essentially? But we'll talk about fans for just a second.
Okay.
So,
Well, cooling fans, the mechanical fans work great. There's nothing wrong with them, but especially if you're, we're building engines, we're tripling, even quadrupling the horsepower. So your little 4-blade fan's not going to work.
yeah.
Another fan that doesn't work is flex fans.
Yeah.
The whole myth of freeing up horsepower,
Yeah.
your butt dyno's not going to notice it.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about a solid steel factory fan is it moves a lot of air. A flex fan, it will start flexing and flatten out at higher RPMs, and I've seen them flatten out as low as 1500 RPM. On the freeway, you're 21, you're pushing a lot of air through. Are you freeing up horsepower? Not enough for you to know. Now, when you get to electric fans, it depends. We have 4 levels of fans. So if you're a low horsepower, you don't need as much CFM. The fans are going to do the job. You start getting into higher horsepower, then we have the thick paddle fans. They move a lot of air. So if you want to step up your game, you go to the brushless like you did on the Twinnebago.
Yeah.
But that's a big fan. It pulls a lot of power, and you need to have the wiring to support it.
Yeah.
Brushless fans will last a very long time because there's no brushes to wear out.
Yeah.
It's strictly a DC type motor, but any brush type fan is like a starter and alternator. The brushes, after a while, they start to wear, and once they wear, what does that do? That creates heat, and that draws more current.
Yeah.
So get a strong enough fan, but is there a magical number of CFM? Not particularly, because if you want to look for, I want a 1600 CFM fan, you're going to look forever to find one with that specific rating. You just need one that's going to pull enough air.
Yeah. That's the other thing that, Mike brings up a good point too. If you are going to jump into the junkyard stuff and you're going to go brushless and, do some of the things that you watch me do on here,
Right.
Make sure that your wiring game is up to the task, that you understand it enough. And if you
Yes.
don't, consult somebody that does know, because you will burn your car down if you wire it incorrectly. And that's not my fault. That's not Mike's fault. That's on you if you want to be a knucklehead and do those types of things. So consult the manufacturer, or like if you buy a kit from Champion, they'll supply you with the wiring needed to support the fans that they sell. So
Right.
I just want to state that, because when you get into those big boy fans, you're talking 70 amps, 60 amps
Right.
of current. It's no joke. They're
And always pull your current through a relay.
Yeah.
You're going to get a little bit of current from a fan, sometimes 20 to 30 amps. Most switches, if you put a switch in a dash or attach it to a sensor somewhere, they're a lot smaller gauge wiring. It's not going to handle the current of that, and you're gonna burn some things up. I recommend, if you have 2 fans, 2 relays. Don't try to crimp all those wires together and one little splice to power 2 fans. So get 2 relays, better to be safe.
Yeah, better safe than sorry. One more quick question that I saw in here is cores. So we all have different radiators with different cores. What's advantage, disadvantage? What do you guys sell? Like, what do you recommend for like an average car, or is there, what's with the amount of cores and radiators?
Oh, okay. So I refer to it as rows. People say
Rows,
core.
yeah, cores.
Right,
That's
right.
what I meant.
So
how many rows are the core?
Yeah, we have a 2-row that's an economy version. We have a two-row 1-inch tubes, and our 3-row, I believe, are 5/8 inch tubes. We found that our 2-row.
What does that actually mean? There's multiple tubes, right?
Right. So basically, if you're looking at, when you talk about a 2-row or 2-core, you have 2 sets of cores like this the coolant will pass through, go to the bottom, and you've got two. When you start getting into 4-row, you've got 2 rows sandwiched in between, and you don't have the advantage of surface air that's going to cool it down a little bit. So those are strictly for big block, racing, high horsepower, no air conditioning, no transmission cooler in front of it, because that's pretty thick to pull all the air through.
Right.
When you have a 2-row or a 3-row, you have a little bit more surface air that helps cool it down a little bit, but we found that our 2-row and our 3-row, they work about the same.
Okay.
And they're pretty close to the same thickness.
Okay. Yeah, and then that also goes kind of with the fan too, is when you start stacking things in front of the radiator, you have to remember that,
Right.
because like you said, if you had a thicker core and then you have an AC condenser, maybe you got a transmission cooler, however that, you got to get the airflow through it. I think airflow is important.
It's very important, and typically when we're talking about overheating, we've got an airflow issue or we've got a coolant flow issue, or both. So you can really get into a long conversation about it, but there are times and ways that we can figure out where your problem might be. It's throwing a radiator at it. One of the other myths we talked about, I've heard, I'm overheating, I'm going to get an aluminum radiator and cool this down. Well, any brand new radiator is going to cool it down if your radiator has a problem and it's clogged. So not necessarily going to cool it down just because it's aluminum. Aluminum can cool your temperatures a few degrees, but there's no guarantee. If you have an overheating problem, again, you want to find out where the problem is before you start throwing money at it.
Yeah, I think a sufficient cooling system that's actually working,
Right.
Majority of the time seems to be the ticket. Then the one hard thing that I can see how to answer some of these questions is, it's like me, I have weird stuff in my car. It's like when I go to the auto parts store and they ask me, what's it for? Is it 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive? And I'm like, it's a Winnebago with a turbo. And, so a lot of you guys too, you build, swap things or different stuff.
Yeah, it's really difficult when you start modifying things. We have guys that, I talked earlier about, doubling, tripling, even quadrupling horsepower. One guy contacted us and I'm overheating, what do I do? Well, he's got a 65 Chevelle and he's got the 22-inch radiator, but he's got a 671 Huffer sticking through the hood with about 690 horsepower.
Yeah.
So you need to up your radiator. You basically, that radiator size was for the anemic 6-cylinder that came in the car.
Yeah.
But you triple your horsepower. You don't necessarily have to triple your radiator size, but you need to open up that core support. You need to get better airflow. You need to get more coolant capacity and more coolant flow.
That's what I was getting at. There's no one size shoe fits all, especially when you start swapping and modifying things.
No.
So if you're going to up your horsepower, you're going to have to up your radiator game along with it. So I would say, is it safe to say if there is extra room for extra radiator and your horsepower and things go up, is that something you should take advantage of?
Absolutely. I mean, you're increasing your horsepower, increase your coolant capacity, increase your coolant flow, increase your airflow. That just stands hand in hand.
Yeah.
You stay with a small radiator and you triple your horsepower, the radiator's not going to do the job. And it's not the radiator's fault, it's the size of the radiator.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then I learned that from them as well, because I drove the Malibu. I had a stock size radiator. So I don't have a stock size radiator in that now. We fit the largest one that we could fit in the parameters that I needed.
Right.
So I have a radiator that's not even for my vehicle. And of course I made it fit in there. I shoehorned it. But those are the types of things that I expect you guys to do as well. So take advantage and utilize the space that you have, as much airflow fan as you can wire up properly. And get the surface area there and get the airflow and hopefully some happy hot rod.
Right. Once you start modifying your hot rod, you got to keep in mind you're modifying the engine, the transmission, the suspension, the brakes. You have to modify your cooling system. After all, you've got all that money invested into your engine, you want to make sure you cool it and take care of it.
Yeah, you don't want to melt it down, that's for sure.
No.
Well, bit of technical difficulty, so that's kind of show you guys are watching. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the time. Thank you very much for coming out and then hunkering down in my little corner neck of the woods. But real quick before we go too,
we're going to talk about this little item here.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I grew up with back in the Stone Ages when they chiseled everything They had an inline coolant filter, which was great, but it was a little T. It had a cap on it. You couldn't see inside of it. So every once in a while, you'd have to go and twist the cap off. There's a little basket, look at the sediment in there. And so what that does is it protects your radiator. So it keeps all the debris and all the junk, the scale, pieces of gaskets that fall apart, silicone from gaskets or edges. It keeps it out of your radiator. So what we've done is we have an inline coolant filter. And this is, you remember the cookware, they had the glass, the high heat. This is a similar type product. I can't say the name. See, I'm not supposed to say
I
that.
didn't say it. I didn't say the whole thing.
He didn't say it, yeah. Yeah, it's not that brand, but it's similar to it. So it handles the heat. If you drop it, it's going to break like any glass. But it allows you to see the coolant color. So as your coolant starts getting dirty, you'll see as the filter starts clogging up, you'll see the way that these work. It does have an arrow on here, the flow. You want the flow to go from the outside of the filter to the inside and out and into your radiator. Larger surface area, more easier to see it, so you have more visibility. And when your coolant's nice and clean, it looks cool at a car show. Now, once it starts getting filled up, it just comes apart and
Serviceable.
you can service the filter.
Rinse it out.
You rinse it out from the inside to push everything out of it, clean it, put it back together just like this, put it back into your system. Now you want to put this on the upper hose because the coolant flow is going to go into the top of your radiator, so you want to protect your radiator. So these coolant filters, they're a great deal. They're running about 100, 112 bucks, I think, somewhere around there.
Cool.
But they work great. And like I said, you have it at a show, people love them.
Yeah, I'll just give you guys a quick. So it looks like a stainless element, and essentially, yeah, that's same thing on EFI filters. If you guys didn't know that, you want to run with the filter element this way and the coolant flow that way, so it comes from the outside and then goes in. And then especially when you rinse it out, you blow all the junk off of it versus back into it. So
Absolutely.
that is very cool, man. Well, thank you for coming out. Sorry about the technical difficulties. And then
It happens.
let's get out of here. We're gonna go grab some food.
Yeah.
And we're gonna hang out for a little bit longer. But thank you guys for watching. More questions, leave them in the comments. If we didn't get to something, we can field them. I'll have Mike pay attention to this video so he can be in the comment section as well, answering questions when he has time. It's not like this is his channel. He has a normal job. So if you ask a question, be patient. We'll get around to it. We'll get back to you. And that is it, you guys. Thank you for watching.
You know what to do? Like and subscribe.
Oh, yeah, subscribe. Good one.
There you go.